Ashley Fitzgerald, a slide-narrated video presentation. How exercise affects depression. A review. Introduction. Major depressive disorder, depression, is a familiar and severe medical disorder that negatively influences how an individual thinks, acts, and feels. Depression prompts sentiments of sorrow and loss of involvement in recreations that an individual took part in. There are various causes of depression, such as inherited traits, brain chemistry, biological differences, and hormones. Extensive evidence shows that physical exercise is a potent gene modulator that evokes structural and functional alterations in the brain, determining immense benefits on cognitive functioning and overall health. The focus of this review will be on the psychological and physical benefits of exercise on a depression state of mind, supported by the research of fellow reviews. Article selection and methods. To the left is the process of the method used for this project. Research engines used, such as PubMed, ProQuest, Taylor and Francis, and Cochrane Library. The search terms used for this project were science, depression, psychological exercise, brain function, and intervention. The workflow used is a literature review was conducted of the databases referenced above for eligible articles. Based on the inclusion criteria and search parameters, relevant data was analyzed. Some of the inclusion criteria were control trials, peer reviews, articles found in PubMed, ProQuest, Taylor and Francis database, and Cochrane Library, and more. A few of the exclusion criteria were articles not in English, restricted articles meaning they were unavailable, and articles found before the year 2010. Descriptive data on assessment. Information regarding the effective depressive exercise practices were described and analyzed properly. To our right, this is a chart of some methods and article selection. How many relevant titles and abstracts reviewed? Almost roughly 200 were reviewed. How many articles rejected based on title and abstract review? A surprising 193 were. The rest of the chart fully reviews articles and methods that were used throughout this project. Charts and data. The chart on the left, Figure 1, is a graph showing the mean of how exercise affects depression in people above the age of 40. The dark blue color, SMD, meaning standardized mean difference, is being compared to the CI, the confidence interval. While on the right, Figure 2, this graph shows the mean and how exercise affects depression in adolescents, using the same parameters of SMD, standardized mean difference, and the light blue color, CI, confidence interval. Charts and data continued. Similar to the previous charts, these charts use SMD in the light yellow and CI, the control interval, in the light green. Except the difference between the two is that these charts are using the mean in mice and how exercise affects their depression. These are two separate trials from the same source. As you can see, the data is similar to the human trials, but not exact, and they are still looking into further research. Discussion. This discussion was organized into categories, such as psychological. Then it was sorted by its type of source. This example is a journal. This is a beneficial peer-reviewed journal because it gives great information all about depression and what exercise can do to it. For example, depression affects roughly 9.5% of the U.S. adult population each year, and it is estimated that approximately 17% of the U.S. population will suffer from a major depressive episode at some point in their lifetime. Depression has been ranked as the leading cause of disability in the United States, with over $40 billion being spent each year on lost work productivity and medical treatment related to this illness. This information is useful, but is more in general and not very specific, which could have benefited the source. This information is given even though it is not specific, it is good information and compares well with other information about the topic from several other sources. This journal was very well, but it could have been a bit more specific, like I said previously. Discussion continued. Like I said before, I sorted the discussion by categories and the type of source. This category was practices and studies. The type of source was also a journal. This source discusses depression and anxiety, which gives a quick side view of other things exercise could affect, but it mainly focuses on the meta-analysis. For example, the subsequent meta-analysis were based on a total of 92 studies with 4,310 participants for the effect of physical activity on depression and 306 study effects with 10,755 participants for the effect of physical activity on anxiety. Physical activity reduced depression by a medium effect, and anxiety by a small effect. This study is similar to others, but this one does not focus on one type of person per se, males under the age of 35. This study has many people with the same illness but with different ages and genders. Another thing that makes this practice different is that it's on humans. Most of the other studies have been on mice, other mammals. This is a consistent but also inconsistent study. Conclusion. In this review, our goal was to find whether or not exercise could have an effect on depression. What we did was we looked into several other peer reviews, comparing other data that we found and seeing what we could come up with. In conclusion, the findings of these studies and fellow reviews provide the support to the assumption that regular exercise is successful in promoting a range of physiological and psychological conditions, while also being beneficial among individuals with depressive symptoms. This paper is significant in the fact that it is now one of the several others to also prove that this theory is to be proven true. Although, like others, it proves the thesis, it is also unique by going into depth in certain categories other papers sadly did not look into. This review looks into how the brain transmits signals and exercise affects them in depressive state of mind. It also has an in-depth understanding of how depression works in the brain and what exercise does to it. In all, this paper was examined and the scientific evidence on the impact of how it can affect depression, while focusing on the evidence that indicates how depression can be affected by physical activity. Overall, we were able to discover that exercise does have a significant effect on depression by going through several trials, several peer reviews, and dozens of different sources. Thank you for listening to my slide recorded presentation.